And welcome back to part 4 of the Simpson saga. I know I said that part 2 was going to be the finale, but I lied.
We're back for more.
Let's see where we're at now. OJ went to the funeral, hitched a ride with the Brown family back to their place, and now it's getting sent to grand jury. He sent AC into his house, and everyone thought he was there, but he's staying with Kim Kardashian and her dad.
That brings us to June 17th. The police decide they're going to arrest him because they want to do it before the grand jury. Because I think they think it looks bad if it's a grand jury.
Gotcha. Okay.
This is just a total nonsense situation.
So the police decide that they'll arrest him at 8:30 in the morning. They were going to call Shapiro and demand that he was brought in by 11 a.m. to the Parker Center. At 11:30 a.m., he would be transported to the criminal courts building for his arraignment. 11:45 a.m., the prosecutors would hold a press conference, and 12 p.m., police would answer questions. That was their plan for the day. And as we know, it's the day of the infamous Bronco chase. That is not exactly how it all goes down. Do you guys remember where you were when you watched the Bronco chase?
We were watching TGIF.
We were watching TGIF, yeah. And then we had to go to bed before it was over. How about you, John? Were you watching?
Yeah, I was at home, probably watching TGIF or maybe the NBA Finals. I don't remember exactly what was on during the Bronco chase.
It would have been around 9:30 p.m. Eastern when it would have broken into.
It's like we would have just gotten out of school, too.
Mm-hmm.
Either one of you take a guess? I thought this was pretty wild. How many people watched it?
I know the answer, so I won't answer.
Can you tell me how many people watched the Super Bowl this year?
123.7 million viewers. Call it 124.
I'm going to guess 75 million watched the car chase.
Wrong. 95 million.
I was close. Wow. It was kind of forced on every channel. So
other shows that beat it were the Apollo 11 moon landing, Richard Nixon resigning, MASH finale, Roots, and The Day After, which was about nuclear war. But those were all planned events. They were advertising them. But this was the first live event to just happen in the moment. And then like 95 million people were watching it.
Oh, I found it. ABC aired TGIF. I didn't know that. Step by Step was on at 9 p.m. and Hanging with Mr. Cooper was on at 9:30. Now that I say that, I feel like I remember Hanging with Mr. Cooper being on at that point.
I agree. I think it was. Which makes sense because it started around 6:30 Pacific. So that would be around 9:30 our time. So that was what was planned for the day. We know that that's not what happened because we were all alive and watching the Bronco chase that night. But
not everybody. We could have some young fans. And hey, if you are one of those young fans, make sure you like, share, and subscribe.
Yes. From us wise people from the 1900s. Have you not heard that? Where people say, "Ooh, you're old. You're born in the 1900s."
Usually they would say like the 90s or 80s. When you say 1900s, it's people being born in the 1980s.
My kids call it the 1900s. They're not wrong, but it sounds so old.
The Titanic sunk in the 1900s.
19 teens, actually.
So here's what actually happens on June 17th. So 6 a.m., Kato Kalin.
Just going to bring him up.
He's woken by a telephone call.
Kato Kalin's like, "You're not OJ."
LAPD informed him they would be picking him up at 8 a.m. and escorting him downtown for more interviews with the police.
Kato's getting pulled in too?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, boy.
2 hours later, detectives arrived with a subpoena for a grand jury and for Kato to testify that afternoon. They were very keen on locking in his testimony so it didn't change to support OJ. This was an unusually confrontational way to proceed by only giving him a few hours' notice. But Kato still scrambles and arranges for a lawyer to meet him at the DA's office so he can talk to a lawyer before he goes and testifies in front of the grand jury.
I wonder if he got his running that day. Maybe at least a jacuzzi. At least a dip.
I wonder if he's had the free reign of the jacuzzi since OJ hasn't been around. Like, what's he going to do? He's got bigger things on his mind now. I'm leaving these on all night.
He won't even know what the electric bill is.
He'll be cutting overhead by using candles by the time I'm done with him.
So 8:30 a.m. as planned, Detective Lang calls Shapiro and tells Shapiro the police had an arrest warrant charging OJ with double homicide with, quote, special circumstances. So in California, special circumstances made OJ eligible for the death penalty, and he would also not be allowed bail. So Shapiro knows by them saying that when he entered jail, he would be staying there for the duration of his trial, at least. Shapiro says he'll do his best to get OJ to the Parker Center by 11 a.m., but he was worried about OJ's mental state. That's what he told the police. So Shapiro heads over to the Kardashian mansion. OJ is sedated in the first floor bedroom with Paula. She had been by his side for much of the week.
She had already dumped him.
So at this point, no one knows that she had broken up with him on the answering machine. That didn't come out until during the civil trial. And no one picked up on any signal that there had been any trying to end their relationship. Everyone thinks they've been together and nothing's been interrupted between the two of them.
By design, I'm sure.
By design, by who?
The defense. They're like, you got to stay together with him, so that just looks better. We can't let people know how bad of a day OJ had on the 12th.
Don't even start to talk about the Jets.
If you bring up that tight dress that Nicole wore to that dance, we are screwed.
Shapiro wakes up OJ and tells him they have to take him to the Parker Center to surrender. Al Cowlings is summoned to the house. OJ has another physical exam with some doctors. They take photographs to show that he doesn't have any other defensive wounds.
Have you seen that picture? It's weird. It's just this guy, pants are down to his ankles. He's just in underwear, and he's just standing in Rob Kardashian's living room with this doctor, like with a camera almost in his crotch.
Google shirtless OJ. OJ wearing a Speedo and a pink fedora. I think it's AI, but it's fun. Do you see these pictures, John?
Yeah.
We'll post these on Twitter, folks. Oh, here we go. I see him now. First picture that came up. Medical examination showing no bruising on OJ. Yeah, he looks kind of surprised looking at the camera. Like, what?
Like his eyes are really big.
He definitely looks doped up.
Shapiro's really scraping at whatever he can get. Look, he doesn't have any defensive wounds, so he couldn't have done it, right? It couldn't have been him because he would have scratches and he would have bruises. Now, he still does have his cut finger, but I guess they think that's been explained.
What's the hierarchy at this point of the defense team?
It's really just Shapiro right now. He's starting to make calls to bring people in. F. Lee Bailey was around for the polygraph, I believe. Ooh. So Shapiro's on the phone every 15 minutes with the LAPD. Now, remember, the LAPD do not know where OJ is because they think he's at his house because they've assured the DA's office that they won't lose him because everyone knows where he is because the media is following him around. But they had tricked the media into thinking he was at his house, and the police are like, where are you? 10:30 a.m., OJ says he wants to take a shower, talk to his mother and his children. So OJ, Paula, and Al Cowlings go back into OJ's bedroom, and they're down there for a while. At noon, police are tired of waiting for Shapiro to bring OJ to them. At this point, he's already an hour late of surrendering himself. So they say they want to bring a squad car to pick him up. And reluctantly, Shapiro finally gives them the Kardashians' address so that they can come get him. So Shapiro told Kardashian make sure OJ got ready and wore a suit. OJ and Paula go out to the yard and they were hugging each other. OJ told her he wanted her to leave. She said, I'm not leaving. He insists she call her manager and go to the airport. When the manager arrived, Paula was crying and wouldn't get into the car. OJ angrily tells Al Cowlings to give her some cash and get her out of here. Kardashian and Al Cowlings get her into the car. The people watching from the house felt like it was really embarrassing the way she was acting so dramatic. OJ goes back inside to his bedroom and Kardashian enters and OJ's sitting on the bed with pictures of Nicole, Justin, and Sydney around him, and he has a pistol wrapped in a towel sitting on his lap. After they pray together, OJ tells Kardashian he was going to kill himself. Kardashian tells him he should think about his children and not do it. Although at the same time, Kardashian's considering the fact that OJ is facing prison and he's not sure what he would do if it was his life. So OJ says, I'm going to kill myself in this bedroom. And Kardashian says, you can in my daughter's bedroom. Why don't you go outside?
Which daughter do you think it was? Chloe. What do you think, John?
Not sure. But it's a little weird that he's thinking he wants to do it in a kid's room. That's weird. Seems like really absent-minded.
Rob Kardashian's like, you can't do it in my daughter's bedroom. Why don't you go outside? So at this time, everyone else thinks OJ is getting ready for the police. He's getting dressed up in his suit because they're coming to pick him up. But him and Kardashian go outside, and OJ considers another spot in the bushes, but then says they were too close to the house. So then Rob Kardashian suggests he do it in a place in the yard a little way out, but OJ didn't want to be baking in the sun.
I don't like that for me.
OJ suggests outside the first floor living room window, but Rob Kardashian doesn't want to think about it when he's sitting there looking out the window. OJ considers the driveway, but says, I can't do it in the driveway. Cars parked there. They'd be parked over where I was. Kardashian suggests Bel Air Church, where he married Nicole, and OJ likes that idea, and he wants Al Cowlings to drive him there.
Just like jump off a mountain into the sea. I'm just envisioning that scene at the end of Point Break. You ever see that where he's finally busted and it's storming and he's like, just let me go out one more ride. And it's like a suicide surf. And then you never see him again.
Or we could have thought back to what Leslie Nielsen said in The Naked Gun, and would have probably been on set for that. To go without your parachute opening when you jump out of a plane, or get your nuts caught in a lap ladder, as they say.
What's a lap ladder?
I guess it's just you the fall and something just closes and crushes your testicles. I don't really know what the quote, but it just sounded funny.
So they're going through areas of the house. Do you think Rob Kardashian's like distracting him?
Yeah, I think he's trying. The more he can get him moving and waste time, the police will come and take him and he'll be safe. Church.
Killing yourself at a church, I mean, that's not the way you get a ticket to heaven. Committing a mortal sin
so
in
Rob
a church,
Kardashian,
you can't do that. Okay.
In the book that he contributed to, he talked a lot about that and how he was very worried. OJ going this way, he wouldn't be making it into heaven, but then he just decided there wasn't anything else he could do.
Really?
Well, if he murdered his wife
allegedly
wasn't going to have a good time getting into heaven, probably.
He'd have a little bit of explaining to do at the pearly gates, I'd say.
Didn't get reconciliation in before he did any of this other business.
So Kardashian suggests Bel Air Church, where he married Nicole. OJ likes that, and he wants Al Cowlings to drive him there. Rob Kardashian is sad that they have come to an agreement on location, but figures he's tried all he can at this point to stop him. Kardashian decides, since OJ's apparently maybe going to be going somewhere, why don't we get a bunch of last pictures together? So he goes and grabs his camera, and they start doing these weird group pictures where like...
No.
Yeah, it was like group pictures and individual pictures. And then everyone but OJ and Al Cowlings go upstairs to meet. And they're like, okay, we don't know what's going on down here. We're going to be upstairs, so don't run away. And Rob Kardashian knows that OJ's planning to leave, but he doesn't tell anyone.
He thinks he's going to leave to kill himself?
Yeah. A little after noon, the squad car arrives at the Kardashian house and a police helicopter was circling overhead. Shapiro asked if they could be the ones to break the news to OJ that the police had arrived. The officers agreed. A doctor went into the room to get OJ, but they couldn't find him. And then everyone in the house started searching everywhere for him. This is when they all realized Paula and Al Cowlings are missing as well. And police declare the house a crime scene. OJ calls Rob Kardashian from Al Cowlings' car from his cell phone.
How did they get out of the house without anybody noticing?
They were all looking the other way.
Yeah, how did the police not know?
They must have missed him. In a white Bronco.
Not the same white Bronco, right?
A different white Bronco. There were two. Isn't that crazy?
Not if Al Cowlings wanted to be just like OJ Simpson.
Yeah, this is his Bronco.
He got the same exact Bronco.
Paula had the same Bronco too.
Nuh-uh.
Mm-hmm. There were 3 white Broncos.
And a white Ferrari.
OJ calls Kardashian from Al Cowlings' car, told him he shot himself in the head, but he didn't die. He said he had gone to the church, held the gun to his head, and the pistol malfunctioned. Now, all of a sudden, OJ seems super happy and says, I'm going over to Nicole's now. And Kardashian's like, all right, I guess I'll talk to you later. OJ calls Nicole's dad and says they're dropping by the Bundy Drive townhouse. Nicole's dad called the police, and the police got there before OJ. So when OJ and Al Cowlings saw them, they changed the plans where they were going.
Now, that would be a place to kill yourself.
Maybe that's what he was thinking. I guess he just thought people were going to call the police.
No, I think he knew exactly what he was doing, that people were going to call the police. He wanted a big spectacle.
Meanwhile, the press are all waiting for this big press release that the prosecution has promised because no one knows that at this point the police can't find OJ. And there is a bomb scare where all the press are waiting and none of the press leave. Meanwhile, the grand jury's happening. So Cato came down for questioning. His attorney shows up at 12:55 p.m. The grand jury's starting at 1. Clark tells Cato's attorney he has 3 minutes to speak with Cato because he was going to be speaking to the grand jury at 1 p.m. Cato's attorney tries to get it moved to Monday, but Marcia Clark will not agree. Cato's attorney tells Marcia he's going to tell Cato to plead the 5th. Clark threatens to arrest the attorney for obstruction of justice. So remember what we said about the grand jury last time is that you do not have a right to an attorney as a witness in a grand jury. So 1 p.m., Cato goes down to the grand jury to testify as a witness. He states his name, takes his oath, And the only thing he would say is, on the advice of my attorney, I must respectfully decline to answer and assert my constitutional right to remain silent. So they try this a few times. The foreperson officially found Kalin in contempt of the grand jury and ordered Cato to the judge's quarters. Because he was a witness and not a suspect, he did not have the right to invoke the Fifth Amendment. The judge ultimately allowed Cato to have the weekend and warns him not to flee. And apparently the judge was like, don't go to Brazil because you won't like the consequences. And everyone laughed because they thought it was funny at the idea of Cato fleeing because he just was so all over the place. They were like, this guy's never going to flee.
What if they just turned the table when he was there and the grand jury all look around at one another? Maybe we should make this guy a suspect.
I solemnly swear I turned those jets off of the jacuzzi. Look, I didn't spill orange soda in his Bentley. What else do you want me to do for the guy? Sheesh.
And they said not to flee to Brazil. Does Brazil not extradite?
I think he was such an doofus that they're like, don't flee to Brazil, Cato. They were kind of implying that he didn't have the know-how to do such a thing.
Unless he was born in Brazil. I know natural-born Brazilians.
He was born in Wisconsin.
Well, maybe that's what we think. But if he was actually born in Brazil, he wouldn't be extradited back to the U.S. They don't extradite their own naturally born citizens. Fun fact.
Okay, so Cato is given the weekend.
The reason that Marcia Clark was so insistent that Cato testify is because he was so squirrely. She was worried he was going to change his story. This guy has all of the information about the timeline. And if he gets to OJ or someone gets to him, we have to get it locked in for the grand jury so that they can hear the same story that he told the police, that he doesn't change it. So she's worried by giving him the weekend that he's going to come up with some other version of events because she's not 100% convinced that he's not involved in the murder somehow. So now we're back to OJ. It's 1:55 p.m. LAPD addresses the press, informed them that they had obtained a warrant for OJ's arrest. He was supposed to surrender and he hasn't yet appeared, and they are actively searching for him. And that was so shocking, the journalists all gasped at once. Journalists that were in the room said it was a crazy thing to hear, everybody gasping.
Because they said they couldn't find him?
Yeah. So the police put out an all-points bulletin, and because they had not seized his passport, they had to also alert Border Patrol, Airlines, Customs, and the Mexican Judicial Police. So this is what Marcia Clark was worried about. This is what she was saying. Like, you're not taking his passport, you're not getting him in custody, he's going to disappear. So back at the house, the police declare the Kardashians' house a crime scene. Through sequence of events, they realize Paula had left before OJ and Al Cowlings, so they don't think that she's with OJ. They realize it's just OJ and Al Cowlings that must be together. And Kardashian kind of appears out of nowhere, and he has this OJ suicide note in his hand. Remember he wrote a suicide note?
Mm-hmm. You read it?
I read part of it, yeah.
So like Rob Kerr said, look what I just found. Turns out OJ was a battered husband. Who would have known?
3 p.m., District Attorney Gil Garcetti gives a press conference. At 5 p.m., Rob Shapiro holds his own press conference. He says, for the sake of your children, please surrender immediately. That was his message to OJ. He recounts the events of the day, and he introduces Robert Kardashian, who read the suicide note, which was actually dated 2 days before the 17th. So there was some confusion about, did he write it that day or did he write it 2 days before? And they were just using it as we got this in our back pocket, this suicide note. It's very strange that it had the wrong date on it. Maybe he had his dates mixed up. He was on a lot of drugs.
Well, what was OJ doing at this time?
He's in the Bronco. They're driving all around. They went to the church, then they went to Nicole's condo, then they went over towards her gravesite, and then there were police there too. They're out driving around. No one knows where he is. The police don't know where he is.
So they haven't seen him. Mm-mm. I'd love to know what they were up to. They've been gone for a couple hours.
They've been gone for about 5 hours at this point.
Wonder if they stopped at McDonald's.
He could have been out of the state, but they're just driving around LA.
I'm telling you, this whole thing was planned. They wanted the spectacle for whatever reason.
I think Ford put him up to it. He worked for Ford since the 70s.
He did?
Yeah. Said
really?
75. Mm-hmm.
That'd be quite a risky task to take on.
He could have been seeing these legal costs coming up. He was like, I got to make a quick buck. And then Ford was like, hey, you get Al Cowlings' Ford Bronco on TV, we'll cut you a deal. I wonder if something like that would happen.
Ford Bronco sales surged by 23% after OJ's infamous chase and the trial, according to this Reddit post.
There was a good joke in Arrested Development about the Bronco. George Bluth, he escapes prison for a bit and he's disguised looking for a car. And he's like, hey, you got any of those Broncos? And he's like, after that OJ thing, we kind of trying to get away from the whole fleeing convict thing. So here's the Escape, the Ford Escape. So they replaced it with.
So at 6 p.m., the LA media confirmed the description of the car as a 1993 white Ford Bronco with license plate 3DHY503. They're asking the public, keep an eye out for this car and call the police if you see it. So at 6:25 p.m., Chris Thomas, who had been watching evening TV, him and his girlfriend left home and went north on I-5. They were joking about seeing OJ, like, wouldn't it be so funny if we're driving along and we see the Bronco? And then all of a sudden, they look over and they see Al Cowlings. They were face to face with him in traffic through the windows, and he was glaring at them. They said he was so scary. At this point, when they saw him, they were about 5 minutes away from the gravesite of Nicole. They pull over to a phone on the side of the road, how you used to have to call when you didn't have a cell phone. And they call the police. And then a few minutes later, a sheriff deputy spots the car, sees Al Cowlings, checks the plates. Traffic stopped naturally. And so the sheriff's deputy and his colleague got out of their cars in traffic with their guns drawn and go towards the Bronco. They instruct Al Cowlings to stop the engine, and he freaks out, banging the car so hard it was rocking.
What was he mad about?
This is a pretty stressful. He has his friend in the back seat with a gun to his head. He's driving around a fugitive. Police are bringing guns up. The whole Rodney King thing had just happened. He's worried he's going to get killed, I bet.
He did kind of commit a crime by taking him and driving him around. This is a crime.
Felony, yes. Okay. He was harboring a fugitive at this point. And then traffic kind of starts going again, and the officers didn't know what to do, so they get back in their cars and they just start following the Bronco, and they radio for backup assistance. Around that time, Rob Kardashian had gone back to OJ's house and told Jason and Arnell, his two oldest kids, that OJ's probably committed suicide by now. So they think their dad's dead, and then they look at the TV and they start seeing the Bronco chase. And they're like, look, he's not dead. He's fleeing in a Bronco.
Oh, thank God. He's just fleeing.
At 6:45, Al Cowlings calls 911 and tells the dispatcher he has OJ in the car, and he asked the police to back off and said he was trying to get OJ to his mom. The KCBS chopper locates the chase with a dozen police cars at this point at a safe distance behind the Bronco, and they begin broadcasting live. And this was actually not unusual for LA News to display police chases from helicopters. It just wasn't a common practice around the country.
That highway system in LA is conducive to chases. 5-lane highways or the 10-lane highways or whatever.
By 7 p.m., there were 7 news helicopters following the Bronco. Crowds are gathering with signs saying, "Go OJ, save the juice." So this is only 30 minutes after the Bronco's been found. Hundreds of people lined the overpass at Venice Boulevard. 7:15, Detective Tom Lang reached Al Cowlings on his cell phone. Cowlings confirmed they were going to OJ's home. They're going back to Rockingham, and that OJ was still suicidal. Lang arranges for the SWAT team to go to Rockingham House and prepare to arrest Simpson there. And they arrived only 15 minutes before Al Cowlings got there. And this was in the Made in America documentary, is where they were really worried about the Rodney King situation because they knew how much media was there. They knew how much attention it was getting, but the SWAT team was going to have to, if OJ came out of the Bronco with a gun, they were going to have to do their job. They were really worried about how to handle this. One little misstep and it could have been a huge disaster for the LAPD. So the SWAT team gets there 15 minutes later. Al Cowlings pulls into the driveway at Rockingham. There's so many TV satellite trucks in the way that he had to inch his way past them. OJ's son Jason runs out and begins to yell at Al Cowlings. Al Cowlings pushes Jason away. Al Cowlings starts yelling at the police to get back, get away. He stepped out of the car and said, "He's got a gun. Don't do anything stupid. Get the police away."
Are you going to talk about the Howard Stern prank phone call that happened on ABC? Have you ever heard of that?
No.
John, have you ever heard about that?
No. What's that?
This is like probably one of the greatest moments of prank phone call history, and it's also a great moment of the Howard Stern show. It had always been a thing where Howard Stern fans would try to get on the news and prank call the news, and then Howard would get it and play it on the air or whatever. And there was one guy in particular who was pretty good at it, and this guy called in. Man, it is the funniest thing you could ever hear. Maybe we can put it into the episode, but we can't play the Howard Stern version. He'll probably sue us for whatever.
Just going to ask everybody to be quiet for a moment. We have on the phone with us as well Robert Higgins, who lives in the neighborhood and is on the ground and can see inside the van. Mr. Higgins.
Yes. How are you?
Just about as tense as you are, sir.
Oh, my Lord, this is quite the tensest.
What can you see?
Oh, what I'm looking at right now is I'm looking at the van, and I see OJ kind of slouching down, looking very, very upset. Now, look at here. He look very upset. I don't know what he gonna be doing.
Can you see him doing anything specific? Is he merely sitting there?
He is just sitting around, just looking like he'd be very nervous.
Can you hear anything, Mr. Higgins?
It's just too much commotion. I be in the back of a news van, so I can't really hear that good, but I can see it all. And I see OJ. Man, and he looks scared. And I would be scared because there's cops all deep in this.
Thank you, Mr. Higgins.
And baba booey to y'all.
The driveway of OJ Simpson's home in Brentwood, clearly an effort being made to have him come out of the vehicle. In the doorway of the house, his friend, Al Cowling.
Peter, by the way, just for the record, this is Al Michaels. That was a totally farcical call. Lest anybody think that was somebody who was truly across the street. That was not. He said something in code at the end that's indicative of the mentioning of the name of a certain radio talk show host.
Okay, thanks, Al.
So he was not there.
All right, we have them on every coast. Thank you very much. Not the first time nor the last time will have been had, but...
Howard Stern covering that on the show. Peter James is basically in a coma the whole time, barely paying attention.
That was funny.
Yes, he is very upset.
So Al Cowling says, don't do anything stupid, get the police away. OJ starts speaking to the SWAT team negotiator from his cell phone. The helicopters have been there for so long, they start taking turns streaming each other's video on different networks so they can all take turns going to refuel the helicopters.
This is like a complete disaster for the LAPD. All they had to do was arrest the guy.
Yeah.
And it's gotten to this point.
And how did they lose him in the first place? Cato the dog is wandering around the car. So Cato the dog makes another appearance. Another stressful day for poor Cato the dog. At the foot of Rockingham Street, there are several hundred people gathered at this point, mostly showing their support for OJ, with some people that were just kind of curious peppered in there. So at 8:53 p.m., OJ finally gets out of the car, clutching family pictures, staggered into the officer's arms saying, "I'm sorry, guys. I'm sorry I put you through this." He was allowed to use the bathroom, drink orange juice, nice. OJ, and call his mom. Then he was asked if he was ready to go. They're just treating him so strangely for a murder suspect. The police forbade the news helicopters from shining their lights, so the public never saw OJ being placed in an unmarked cruiser for the trip downtown. In the Bronco, they found OJ's passport, a fake goatee, a fake mustache, a bottle of makeup adhesive remover, 3 receipts from Cinema Secrets Beauty Supply that were dated May 27th, 1994, a fully loaded Smith & Wesson .357 Magnum Blue Steel handgun registered to one of Simpson's friends on the LAPD who had bought the gun for him.
Oops.
Nicole's keys that had been missing from her kitchen.
From before she was murdered.
Mm-hmm. And Cowlings had $8,750 cash in his pockets.
Be ready.
He was booked at Parker Center, went to LA County Jail for his first night in jail, spent on suicide watch.
What happened to Cowlings? Did he get arrested?
He did get arrested, yes.
Same time?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, they found the cash in his pockets when he was arrested. In OJ's book that he wrote from jail, he wrote, "The first week I was in jail, I thought about Jesus being crucified." That was the end of that day.
That's a pretty exciting day. I've been saying from the start that he was never planning on killing himself. No way.
Do you think he was planning to flee? What was he doing? And why in 6.5 hours did he just stay in LA?
I'll tell you what, I would pay a ton of money to see what kind of disguise him and Al would have come up with. I would have loved him to get caught with some ridiculous disguise on, dude.
In the trial, he claimed he always carried those around with him so that he could disguise himself and be able to go in public.
Just a Richard Nixon mask. And
that would be funny. Just the two of them getting busted together in Mexico on the Mexico border crossing or whatever with like some really bad costumes.
So what do you guys think about the Bronco Day? What are your thoughts?
How much taxpayer money did he waste that day? I would love to know. I bet it's in the millions. It's got to be.
I found what happened after these cars after the fact pretty interesting. After 2 hours in the spotlight, the chase vehicle was sold by Cowlings to a company called Starry Facts for $75,000.
Whoa.
It was only worth $1,800, according to Kelly Blue Book. But Simpson's former agent Mike Gilbert intervened when he discovered the company's intention. Quote, "We found out that the company was going to rent the vehicle to a company in LA called Graveline Tours that visited famous graves," end quote. Gilbert told ESPN. They were going to reenact the chase with the Bronco and then take people to Nicole's grave. The trial hadn't taken place yet, and we didn't want people thinking anyone associated with OJ did this.
How much would you pay to take that tour?
Pay for the gas, maybe.
I'd pay a decent amount of money and take a ride in it.
It'd be a good story.
I don't know if I'd want to go to Nicole's funeral or...
That'd be weird. I don't need to like recross every road they were on.
It looks like after he died, his white Bronco was set to go on market for $1.5 million.
Which one?
That was OJ's, I think.
It says OJ's infamous white Bronco used during the car chase.
They were different cars.
I know. I think that confuses people.
We gotta set the record straight. Because the guy I saw today, he thinks that the two Broncos played into how he could have gotten away with murder. He was trying to set that up. He swapped cars and they did something, and I don't know exactly how they kind of sold it, but...
Like he had Al's car, so it couldn't have been him with the one with all the blood?
Yeah, like fingerprints and stuff, yeah. So finishing up that thing about the car, so Cowlings, instead of him selling the car to that company so that they can then use it to give tours with, Gilbert, Simpson's former agent, gave Cowlings $75,000 for the car, and for years the infamous Bronco just sat in a condo's apartment garage. They ensured it kept running by constantly changing the battery and taking it out for a drive every other year. But even so, there were only 20 more miles put on the odometer since the chase.
That'd be awesome to have.
The original gas was removed from the vehicle.
They didn't want it to be associated with OJ, so somebody on OJ's team bought it so that they could keep it to themselves, right?
Yeah, exactly. They just put it in storage.
Should be in the Smithsonian.
One day.
You never know.
Might be. What do you guys think about police process of getting OJ? What are your thoughts on that?
Goofed it.
Yeah, they goofed it. Exactly.
When do you think they should have taken him into custody? What point?
I don't think they should have let him leave after they took the fingerprints and whatnot.
Big, your story is trash. I know. We don't need no grand jury. Dude, no. Are you serious? I'll keep shopping at Hertz. I'll keep renting my cars from there. But, dude, you're done. Yeah. The show I was watching today, on the Netflix one that you'd mentioned,
Made in America.
They were interviewing one of the pilots in the helicopter, and who had experience following other car chases in LA. And he was just like, basically, if he was any other black man, he's pretty blunt about it, his car would have been T-boned, run off the road, like low speed 45. He's like, the guy got a police escort, effectively. It wasn't even a chase. Yeah. So everyone was like, what?
I don't fully understand. So the two armed sheriffs go up to the car. Al Cowlings yells at them, and then they just retreated away. Al Cowlings wasn't armed. That just seemed strange that they would retreat so quickly.
I feel like if that would have happened today, they would have unloaded their guns in that car.
They could have shot the tires, so they had to sit.
Could have did what OJ did to the Ferrari. Apparently, he slashed the Ferrari tires.
Oh.
Late for a date?
Mm-hmm.
Now you're really going to be late for a date. I just slashed your tires.
Maybe it was one of those things. He's just a Hollywood guy.
Yeah, I think
gets
it's
away with it. You just get away with more when you're that status.
It just seems like once the first blood test came back that put him there, that should have been enough to at least get him into custody.
I'd have to know how the blood was a match. Was it just the blood type?
No, it was the DNA. The first one that came back, it was that OJ's blood was a match for blood found at the crime scene. So it put him at the crime scene.
I mean, OJ has a type A blood. Isn't that common?
They had DNA sequencing. Everyone was saying DNA evidence, people didn't understand it in 94. And I was curious how accurate it really was. And it was relatively new. They had two different kinds of analysis that they could do. RFLP, they cut DNA into pieces using special enzymes. And then they separated them by size. And then they took a specific pattern of bands. And then they would compare those bands between samples to see if they matched. And that was highly accurate and considered the gold standard at the time. But it required a relatively large amount of DNA and blood. So if they didn't have a lot of blood, they couldn't use that. So then they would use this PCR analysis, which is when they would amplify small amounts of DNA, making it possible to analyze tiny samples. So in the RFLP, the chances of two unrelated individuals having the same RFLP pattern were quoted as 1 in several million to 1 in a billion. To say that it was someone else and not OJ, it would have been a 1 in a million to 1 in a billion chance. For the PCR, it was 1 in several thousand to 1 in several million, depending on the regions they tested, for it to not be a match. The DNA tests used were highly accurate and reliable, and the combination of using both of these gave strong evidence that he was linked to the crime, but the trial raised questions about the handling and integrity of the evidence rather than the accuracy of the DNA tests themselves.
But as far as
properly.
evidence at the time of arresting him, they had enough. I don't know. They shouldn't have even told him when they were going to come pick him up. They should have just swung by his house and picked him up.
Shapiro had negotiated that. I promise I'll get him to you. I've done it before. And they were like, okay.
Tough nuggets. We're taking him.
Do you think he should have missed Nicole's funeral because he was in jail? Do you think the police were just being nice and letting him be free a little longer to be seen at the funeral?
No. I think they goofed it, like John said.
They were walking on eggshells because I think they probably already had it. It was going to be a bit of a race thing. They were probably on eggshells for a few different reasons.
But isn't it weird then that ultimately OJ ended up being found not guilty because they said the police were trying to frame him for being guilty? But in reality, in the first few days, they seemed to be actively trying to make him not guilty. They were letting him run around when they knew that he was probably the one who did it. So why would they then turn around and frame him? That doesn't really make sense.
Did you hear that Al Cowling set up a 1-900 chat line for people to call to ask questions about the juice during the trial? That reportedly netted him $300,000 during the first month of operations.
Those 1-900 numbers are expensive.
OJ also made like millions of dollars selling autographs from jail.
They estimate that the whole thing cost the taxpayers like $9 million or something like that.
Not $9 million then would be $19 million now.
It was
crazy.
just the trial cost $9 million. Yeah, I don't really have that much else to say. I think we covered it pretty well. Thanks again to Emily M. for sitting in and doing all the research and setting up all the facts for the car chase. I had a good time. John?
Yeah, it was super interesting. A lot happened. I had no idea the sequence of events. Like, how did the guy just end up on the freeway in this with the car chase? I just assumed he'd done it, and the next day he was on the run because they immediately assumed it was him, and he felt he had to just run away. I didn't know a whole week went by.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy all the stuff that happened that week.
And we learned a little bit about grand juries. That was more last episode, but that was fun.
Well, thanks for having me, guys. I think it would be cool to do some trial stuff. I think we can take a little bit of a break from OJ, perhaps, and think about the best way to present the trial because it went on for 9 months, and I don't think we want to do 9 million episodes on this. So I'll have to think of some angles to cover
Some
the
ways
trial.
To get through it. Yep.
Yeah, that could work.
Yeah, we're always happy to have you on. We'll brainstorm it and get something together for the fans. Hope you guys enjoyed it, and if you guys are new listeners coming in on the heels of the anniversary of all this OJ Simpson stuff, I'd ask you again, go back to episode 1 and learn a little bit about history. Like, subscribe, and share, and shoot us a text message. Click that little link at the beginning of the description, and we'll answer any questions or comments that you have. We'll bring up on the air. Why don't you tell us what your favorite part of the OJ Simpson chase was?
Or where you were when the Bronco chase happened.
If you were born in the 1900s. And let us know if you would take a tour to Nicole's grave in Al Cowling's Bronco. First person to text us with their address and a comment on the show, we will send you the book about Tadu's Katushka.
We'll get you a signed, autographed copy of a photo Matt and I take from the Thaddeus Katushka National Historic Monument in Philadelphia when we go. So we'll slip that into the book.
Wait, it'll be a picture of the two of you and then you'll both sign?
Yes. We'll sign the picture and the book.
And if you're lucky, John will put a happy face in his O of his name.
That's right.
And we'll give you a shout out on the air. So that's a big one. Thanks a lot, fans. Thanks for hanging in.
Always stay curious.
And we say bye-bye.